Hi. All right, I'll call this meeting of the General Government and Finance Committee to order at 5:30. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call. All members are present. Trustee Jan Miller is on WebEx. And with that, we will move on to item 3, citizen input. Please be advised that we'd like to keep the comments to 4 minutes, and please fill out your slip of paper with your information on and hand it in prior to your comments. Anybody wishing to come forward for public comment?
Shoot. More.
Last time we had a meeting about merit raises and everything else, and the public is, and this committee voted no. And our superintendent or our administrator went and appealed that vote. To a slap in the face to this committee. I thought this committee would go and appeal that decision. I went into the dollar store this week and somebody recognized me as on these meetings, the public. And she said, what the heck is going on with your boards? She said, our taxes are going up. We heard about this $15,000 raise. You know, people are angry and it's going to affect those who are running for office in April, I think. And then another lady heard us and she came by and this was all in the dollar store. And so the public does not like what happened here at all. And it should have never been done to this committee. They should have appealed that decision and they should have said, this ain't going to happen again. And it didn't. I didn't see anybody speak up against this. And I think that's terrible. You have power to make a decision and it should have been appealed. You should not have let this go. There are people in this community that don't even make $15,000 a year. And I know them. And that one lady at the dollar store, my Social Security isn't even that much. And she said, who needs to make that kind of money when you have a board that said no? She says, this is hurting our community. And I really wish somebody would really wake up and say no to what's going on. These people above you put us in such terrible debt, it makes me sick. We stand up here every week and complain and everybody just rolls their eyes like what we say means nothing, and yet we're paying and paying and paying. And now I got to pay another $250 a year for taxes, okay? And I have people that I help, and I'll tell you what, I'd rather give them that money than here to have my money spent on stuff that should never have been. And then they're talking merit increases and, how many people does this affect? Do you know how much that you shouldn't even vote on this on even in the board until you know how many people, what the amount is? This has got to stop. It really does. People are getting wised up. And I thought we put all this stuff on hold, and it's sad. It's really, I really am asking you as a board, you have the power. You should have appealed this decision and let this person who made that decision stop doing this to our village. Because we ain't going to be able to afford to live here in a couple years. And then just going on, because I can't stay for the board, but they're talking now, they want to hire a consultant. What do we have a development director for? Making a ton of money. What's his job? He should be doing the consulting if that's what his job is. When he's getting paid a lot of money, we got to wake up and start saying no to all this stuff. Please, when people start going in the dollar store and getting upset, that means something's going on in April. I really do hope you guys would get encouraged to say, no, we're not going to be embarrassed like this and made fools of. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next one coming forward. Thank you.
Doug Lohman, W180N9881 Rivers Bend Circle West. My comments tonight are going to be on specifically about new business item G and subparagraph 3. Once you get to that, in particular, in many ways, it's going to be a continuation of my comments from the village board meeting of 2 weeks ago. And in here, it says, the third change involves codifying standards in a process for citizen input. The biggest change here will compare the current process is that written comments will not be read aloud. This change is added to shorten meetings and also as recognition that comments are for the benefit of the board, not audience members. And that's from the village attorney. Village attorney wrote that, and that's where it really comes into my comments some 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to pick on the village attorney here a little bit, in that I know he likes to argue, and I'm not besmirching that at all. I like that he likes to argue. I want that in an attorney. That is something I clearly want. The problem is that when it comes time, he's not going to pay the fine. He'll run off and argue our case, yes, but he's not going to do the time. This is the impenetrable barrier between village residents, representatives, and employees, regardless of whether the employees are on a traditional employment agreement or a contract. You just cannot get away from that barrier. They do not hold the responsibility. You, and by extension, us, we hold it. And there's no way of getting around that. And I'm not a betting man. I do not wager money. And I don't know the law. But I will throw some money on that last sentence there. This change is added to shorten meetings. And also is recognition that comments are not for the benefit of the board, not audience members. There's no basis in law in that statement. That's all opinion. It's only opinion. And if I'm wrong, I'm sure the attorney will let us know in one way or another, and I'll be happy to apologize. But that's all opinion, and let's leave it at that. So yeah, this has got to get out of here. As I said 2 weeks ago, You know, it's taking my voice away. I'm amazed at the amount of people that contact me and tell me that they loved my comments. Now, I'm sure there's all kinds of people that disagree with my comments and they choose not to do that, but I'm just amazed at the number that come up to me and let me know that they like my comments. So these comments are for our community, our neighbors, the residents. Another way to put it is the shareholders of this community. And the shareholders, what I mean by it, what I have for evidence of that is these things called tax bills right here. We're all shareholders in this communities. We're talking about employees. Huge difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else wishing to come forward? Hi.
Evening, Melanie Smythe, N140 W17938 Cedar Lane. I agree with Mr. Lohman about that the emails should be read into the record. There are other ways to shorten the meetings. Several have been discussed previously by this group and not followed. What will happen is people who do come to the meeting will just read the emails. So it's going to happen. So that's that. The next thing I've noticed looking across various reports that public safety are held to a different standard than some of the other departments. And I think since work is being done on the handbook, that there should be the same kind of reports that are brought out at public safety, such as overtime, whatever else, should be worked into the DPW meetings also. We should be looking at all of those same things across the board. So I'm suggesting that as part of the handbook updates, that you come up with a template and a procedure or list of types of reports that should be made public and should be consistent across all of the different departments. I think it's only fair that we can't be holding people to different standards. Okay, so now on the projections. So I appreciate the fact that they're here, yay. A couple of comments about them though. The new fire station should be added back in because it doesn't give a full picture about what those projections may be, what the taxes could be, because that would greatly increase expenditures. We also don't have any background details. We don't have any footnotes that with references. So all of those things that are the background details should be made available so that we can do a proper evaluation. It seems to be focused on the only way of getting new revenue into the village is by raising taxes or doing TIDs. And I think there are other ways of doing that. And I think that should be explored. Also on page 27, where you're talking about the assessed value of properties going up at 2% every year for the next 5-6 years, that's not realistic. We're already seeing a top in the real estate market. It may not have hit here yet, but the Midwest is always the last. You see it in Arizona, you see it in California, you see it in Florida, and it will happen. So I do not think that that represents the low scenario when you have 2% increase in property values going up every year. It's just not realistic. So let's see. So it doesn't really explore any other things like, even though we don't necessarily want to do this, outsourcing, no wage increases. And then another question, and this goes back to the whole no background details, is it talks about union numbers being assumed, or they are assumed, 8% for, I believe it was one of the public safety groups. Is that a mandated by state number, or was that just an assumption? So there's a lot more work that needs to be done to this projection to make it clear and to make it viable. But it's a great start. So thanks for doing that. Let's see, anything else? Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to come forward? All right, if not, we will move on from citizen input to consent agenda. And there's one item, meeting minutes of November 17th, 2025. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Jan. Opposed? Motion carries. There is no unfinished business tonight, so we will move on to new business item A. Excuse me, item A, 5-year forecast on general fund revenues and expenditures, debt service levy, and associated tax impact. And this is for discussion. With that, I'll turn it over to our finance director.
All right, thank you very much. Included in your packet was the presentation for the 5-year forecast beginning in 26 and going through 2031. I should have included a slide on what this forecast is not. So this forecast is not, the 2027, 28, 29, 2030, 2031 budget. These are projections based on a few different scenarios of what the likely outcomes will be in terms of general fund revenues and expenditures. As you can all imagine, there are a lot of different moving parts for the village budget, and any one of those things could severely impact or change these projections. This does not take into things such as, when our tax increment district's closing, what happens if we open a new tax increment district, how does that affect general fund revenues, things like that. If the committee is looking for those types of more in-depth scenarios, I think that is something we should definitely do in 2026 with the assistance of Baird, who has some more robust capabilities in those types of projections. Regardless, looking at the presentation tonight, we go through 3 different scenarios. A status quo scenario, which assumes moderate and historically consistent growth trends based on the last several years of development within the village. On the screen, you'll see some of the different assumptions we made as part of that scenario. In addition, we'll go over a low growth scenario that reflects lower than the historical average of the village and how that affects the general fund revenues over the next 5 years. And finally, we go over a high growth scenario where net new construction is higher than it has been the last several years, and we see rather robust increases in different types of revenue within the village, specifically state aid and permit revenue. Taking a look at the status quo scenario, we see a projection of roughly $2.4, $2.5 million over the next 5 years, beginning with the 2027 budget. That is largely driven by increases in the general property tax, development permits, and recreation fees. You'll see, looking at those revenue drivers, roughly a $2.5, $2.6 million increase. You can see here, regardless of the different scenarios, that the general property tax still remains the largest portion of the general fund and greatly impacts the services that the village is able to provide. Taking a look at the low growth scenario, we project rather low net new construction, 1.25%, which the village has not seen in several years, but it has been the average throughout the state. In addition, the low growth scenario reduces development permits and keeps recreation revenues flat over the next 5 years. You can see here, we reduce the development permits from 26 to 27 and hold that flat over the next few years. That puts us more in line with what development permits had been in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Taking a look at the high growth scenarios, this is a more optimistic outlook on development and increases within the village. The largest revenue driver here over the 5 years would be permit revenues. If we happen to see increased development over the next 5 years, we would expect to see those permit revenues increase as well. One of the One of the double-edged swords of development is if when it's high, you get the benefit of increased net new construction and permit revenues. When it's low, you get the double whammy of low net new construction and a decrease in permit revenues. We also anticipate more robust state transportation and state shared revenue in this scenario. So taking a look at the different scenarios with the status quo being in the middle, you see there's a rather wide range from the overall low growth revenue compared to the high growth revenue. Looking at 2031, you see roughly a $2.3 million difference in revenues based on those different factors. Comparing the status quo to the high growth, you see less of an impact. The village has seen over the last couple of years some strong development and permit revenues, so making that high growth scenario closer to the status quo than the low growth. The village has been fortunate over the last several years to have a rather high net new construction rate compared to the low growth scenario of 1.25%. Looking at the change in revenue over a year, you'll see that the high growth really outpaces the low growth in this scenario. Taking a look at the expense forecast for the 5-year outlook, what we did in this scenario is we kept expenses the same for all scenarios. That is likely, that is unlikely to be the case given if the low growth scenario is in fact the one that comes to fruition, that there'll have to be some serious changes to expenses. In this scenario, we kept non-union salaries. We project an annual increase of 3%. For employee benefits, we've also increased them by 3%. This is slightly higher than what we've seen over the last couple of years. The village has been very fortunate to not have to change many of the benefits, including health and dental premiums over the last several years, as we've grown healthy reserves in both of those funds. Looking at the police and fire union salaries, these were based off the current contracts that we have with these departments. Now, you might recall that the police union increase was actually 4% year over year. However, that doesn't take into account a step increase that newer police officers get. So for police and fire, they're on a step scale. So if you were to move from one step to another, that average increase until you get to the top is roughly 13%. Given that we have a younger police and fire workforce, I took an average of that to be 8% on average year over year. And some years that will be higher, closer to 13, and some years that will be lower, closer to 4, depending on where they are on those scales. In addition, I kept operating expenses at an annual increase of 2.5% to keep up with inflation and things such as that. Looking at the general fund expenses, you'll see, well, excuse me, you'll see salaries and benefits carrying the load on the expense side, as we would expect over the next several years, largely driven by increases in salaries and wages for the public safety departments. Comparing expenses versus revenues by scenario. So what we did is we looked at all of the revenues based on the scenario and compared them how the revenues match up against the expenditures given the different scenarios. You'll see things can start to look pretty bleak given the low growth scenario. If the village were to see the types of revenues that are projected in the low growth scenario, we'll quickly run into issues where revenues cannot keep up with the expenses for the village. The status quo, we see some moderate troubles ahead, really beginning in 2028 and beyond. And in the high growth scenario, that is pushed back even further as we get into the late 2020s and the early 2030s. On the screen, you'll see just a comparison of the expenses in the dark purple compared to the different revenues based on the scenario. Taking a look at the debt service levy and the projections that were included in that. So the debt service levy is built around the 5-year capital plan that has been before the village board. The one change that we did make is we did remove a new fire station for $30 million. We took that out in this scenario. Would be happy to go through the numbers with that included. But for this scenario, we took that out, just given kind of where we are with fire station renovation and the projections of the next few years. In addition, some things that could dramatically change the debt service levy is how we structure the debt. In this scenario, I based it off past debt structures. So for some of the larger, for example, for a new police building, I base it off the DPW debt structure. And for our annual program, I base it off a 10-year note, knowing that we're looking at different structures with Baird as we move forward, which could change these numbers. So taking a look at the debt service payments over the next 5 years, you'll see increases beginning really with the 2026 issuance, which will hit the tax levy in 2027. So for example, if all the projects listed in the 5-year capital plan, general fund projects only, we're not talking about the utilities. If all those projects were only funded by debt service or by bond proceeds, and those structures were similar to past structures, we would expect the debt service levy to increase from $5.8 million in 2027 to roughly 11.4 by 2031. This is largely driven by, as you can see, the 2027 issuance, which would include the bond payments for a new police station. Here's similar data in bar graph form. On your screen, you'll see the village property tax levy back to 2024 through the projected 2031. This assumes status quo net new construction of 2.68%. These numbers would vary slightly if net new construction were higher or lower. In addition, on your screen, you'll see the projected village tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value, with the 2025, 2026 being our starting point and working our way through 2031. And on your screen, you'll see the projected property tax bill, strictly the village's portion of the property tax bill. I took an average assessed value for 2026 and increased that slightly over the 5 years to come up with the average tax rate. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, Matthew, a couple questions. So the projected property tax bill, does that include funding the gaps per year, or is that just what your projection is based on?
Yeah, that is not included in funding any gaps. So essentially what would have to happen if we go back to that slide.
That one? Yep.
Yep. So essentially what we would have to do here is to close that gap, we would have to cut expenses in those years by those dollar amounts. So this, back over here. This assumes that we do that, and the tax levy is that 2.68% increase.
So, and our taxes are based on the change in the net equalized value, is that correct?
The net new
The
construction.
net new construction.
Is
I'm
what we're
sorry.
allowed to increase our taxes by. So
Okay.
essentially it takes any new construction within the village, deducts any, demolished buildings, and that percentage is what we can increase the levy by.
And we have increased, no surprise, we have increased borrowing over the last years, and that's one of the reasons for that is that we're limited by that, and that's less than inflationary pricing right now,
Correct.
in my opinion. Not everybody's opinion, but in my opinion, that's part of it.
Correct. The debt service levy cap is much less strict than the general fund tax levy.
All right, I'll open it up to others. Terry?
So, where do I begin? It's a grim picture.
I would say yes, I would say it's a challenging picture. I don't think we're much different from other municipalities around us.
We're not. I just heard tonight on the news that the library in Menominee Falls, did you hear this? cut $300,000 out of their budget and they give it to public safety in Menominee Falls because they can't balance the budget because of the limit. Basically comes back to how we have to limit our tax increases to net new construction. And that's coming back to haunt a number of communities. Nobody wants to see their taxes go up, but I mean, the reality is you got to keep up with inflation. You got to keep up with salaries and expenses. So I mean, we're kind of caught. And I see this picture, this bar graph is telling me that we're kind of caught. We can breathe for a couple of years here, but then we're going to have some serious issues. If we can't raise taxes, what are we going to cut? Whose street isn't going to get plowed? How, we're going to be mowing parks once a month. I mean, it's going to be serious, serious stuff. And I'm glad you brought this up now so we can be thinking about it now and planning for it. And I'm sure that in 2 weeks, you'll come back with all the ideas of how we can fix this, right?
I'll do my best to come up with as many ideas as we can. Yeah.
But it's good to see this, it really is.
Trustee Cutts?
Okay, first a question on the three different scenarios. You had different amounts for state transportation aid, shared revenue. Is that tied to the growth or you're just guessing that's what it would be in that scenario?
The shared revenue is more tied to growth. So shared revenue is tied to the state sales tax. So there are some, more macroeconomic factors for shared revenue. I've just made the assumption that if development's going strong in Germantown, we might see some increases in state shared revenue, if the economy is going well and things like that. State transportation aid is not tied to those types of things. Over the last 5 years, we've had much higher state transportation aid than we've had, throughout the 2010s. So I tried to find a balance of where, I don't expect state transportation aid to increase, by 13% every year, when historically it'd been in the low single digits. So I took a few different scenarios there for that.
Okay, and obviously permit revenue is tied to building, so I do like how you have everything on one page to compare. I appreciate that versus all of these. So even with high growth, by 2031, we're still gonna be 300,000 short. What can we do? Because obviously something has to be cut because expenses are higher than revenue.
Yeah, there'll have to be some tough decisions made by the village board. There are different things you can do for salaries and benefits to close that gap. There are things you can do for, something that comes up that's not popular is the fire protection service that's paid out of the general fund. That could get shifted over to the water utility. That's a tax savings, but then it gets added onto the water bill. You can look at different things where it comes with waste management. Some communities make residents, contract with waste management to pick up their garbage, and then it's not added on to the tax levy. We would have to reduce our tax levy by that amount, but then we're not seeing those inflationary costs year over year, on roughly $1 million contract. So there are those types of things that we would look at to close the gap. And then it comes down to, I don't want to call them, I guess the only word I can think of is non-essential services. What non-essential services, can we live without?
So I agree with Terry. It'll be some hard decisions.
Yeah.
But thank you for this. This is good information.
Thank you. Trustee Jan Miller, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I tried to raise my hand. Can you see it or not? And you probably can't. All right.
I
never
can't
mind.
personally, but
All
yes, I
right.
will ask.
Thank you. Yes, I thank you for putting this together. I think it's a first blush at what we should be concerned about, what we need to do. And I guess I'm mostly excited for this challenge because we have contracted with Baird. And in the meeting that we had when we were interviewing other companies, the only company that came up with a way to save money was Baird, and it was $450,000. That's impressive. Don't ask me what it was. It's in my notes, but trust me on that. And I would say that we will have to really be careful about how we spend our money. And do we really need things? Not just because it's on the list. And every rotation, I'll be all right. Every other year rotation, we get another pickup truck or whatever it is. I'm just saying we are going to have to do a lot of reevaluation and limit our spending. Because if we don't limit our spending, we're not going to catch up. So I'm looking forward to some new creative ideas. We have to over-challenge all of our employees and the village board to come up with proven ideas that will help the budget. Because we don't, and then we haven't even, in your presentation, one of the other things I think we need to keep our eyeballs on are the closing of the TIFs. So I think that we're on the cusp of one of those closing sometime soon. So that needs to be entered into the equation as well. So, but thanks a lot for doing that. And I'll look forward to our presentation from Baird next month. Thank you.
Was forecasted in, Matthew, the TIDs?
No, this does not take into account the closing of the TIDs or any new TIDs.
Okay.
I believe the TIDs, I have to go back and look, are projected to close 2032,
Yeah.
2031,
I was
2032
gonna
in
say
that
it might not
range.
be within this timeline.
Oh, I would just make one comment. The closing of one of the TIDs was in the 2029 or something like that in prior years. So is there a way to achieve an earlier closing? I guess that's what I would question. Thank you.
I'd have to go back and look at some of those reports. You know, the TID that is most likely to close the soonest and the earliest is TID 8.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there has been some amendments to TID 8, so I'd have to go back and look when based on the amendments, the TID is projected to close. My recollection is 2032, but I can go back and double check that. You know, and I think Trustee Jan Miller made some good points. If you take a look at the screen in front of you here for the village property tax levy, you'll see the biggest impact on the tax bill is the debt service levy. Those big ticket items really have an impact on the annual levy. You know, the general fund increase does as well, but looking at, you know, the average debt issuance and you know, is typically higher on an annual basis than net new construction. So those impacts and those decisions really drive the tax bill more than the general fund does.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I appreciate your presentation for this. This gives us some insight of the next 5-year forecast.
Yeah, and I think the plan in 2026 is to work with Baird and do some more in-depth analysis, including, you know, the general fund debt service capital, and they have the models that we can use to how we structure the debt and what makes sense in any given year.
And again, this is a forecast that's not cast in stone. This is best estimate of what we have available right now. We're going to move on to item B, tax exempt properties and payments in lieu of taxes, and this is for discussion. Who's taking this one?
Guess I can take this one. Probably call on the village attorney when we get to that part. So there's been some different discussions regarding property or payments in lieu of taxes, specifically as relates to, you know, ambulance calls and those types of things. So we took a look at some of the tax exempt properties throughout the village. Most of them, unsurprisingly, are churches. So those were not included in this analysis. In addition, some of the property some of the properties have been tax exempt for quite some time, and I was not able to go back and get those assessment records in those years. So looking at the item before you, we're really taking a look at the Gables. And just give me 1 second to pull this up. So we currently have two pilot agreements, one with Fairway Knolls, which contributes roughly $226,000 a year, and one with Life Church, where the annual pilot payment caps out at $10,000. A portion of it is not tax exempt. So we essentially take $10,000 less the taxes they pay, and then they pay that difference to the village, capped out at $10,000. So taking a look at the Gables, we took a look at their last known assessed value, which was in 2018 before they came tax exempt, at roughly, was that $2.5 billion of assessed value. Looking at that correctly. We looked at the average increase in assessed value from 2018 through 2025, which was roughly a 71% increase. Taking a look at what their overall assessed value would be in 2025 and charging that against the village mill rate of roughly, $4.60. Any pilot agreement would likely generate revenue of $168,000 per year, depending on their assessment and how often they're reassessed. I won't go through the legal analysis. I'll leave that to the village attorney if there are any questions on that. But any pilot would likely generate roughly $168,000 in revenue with the Gables.
So if I recall, the Gables, when the Gables was developed, we included that in the developer's agreement that we wanted the payment in lieu of taxes, and that's why we have that amount coming in.
Fairway Knolls, correct.
I'm sorry, Fairway Knoll. And also with Life Church, is that correct? Is
Yes.
that under a developer's agreement or some other agreement? However, the Gables doesn't have anything like that. So what is it even possible that we can collect a pilot from the Gables? What's possible when it comes to that?
Sure. So you are correct that in both the instance of both Life Church and Fairway Knoll, both of those were basically a condition of the approval of their particular plans. In both cases, the village board was particularly concerned about giving up what was, effectively our main commercial corridor for a non-taxable purpose. And so as part of that, both developers basically volunteered a pilot agreement to kind of offset some of the losses that we would have there. That really becomes kind of the hook. We could of course go to the Gables and say, hey, we'd like to talk about a pilot agreement. There's not a whole lot of incentive for them to do that, and we can't just unilaterally impose one, because that effectively goes against the idea of why they're tax exempt, because they're not paying taxes by decree of the legislature. So really it would be kind of a voluntary type negotiation with them to do that. Other options that potentially exist, my colleagues across the state have talked about, various ideas, none of which have been particularly implemented yet because nobody wants to necessarily go down that road. But, things, along the line of setting, response standards for, paramedic service, for example, that, everybody gets a certain level, and then above that, we're going to start charging you on a per call basis type of a thing, kind of like a false alarm fee that we do with police departments, false alarms. So those are things, those types of things that we've looked at to do that. The possibility of including that may be sufficient to cause Gables to say, hey, we'd certainly be willing to pay something. At the end of the day, it also becomes how you negotiate it. One of the key components to that process usually involves the owner of the property or the developer saying, we'll pay your taxes or the equivalent of your taxes village, but we're not going to pay for the schools because we don't use the schools. We're not going to pay for the county. We're not going to pay for MATC. And so it's, while they're still paying something, it's a discount over what they otherwise would be paying. And so, it becomes a little bit of a negotiation as part of that too. And so you use what leverage that you potentially have to try to potentially get something. But there's not a way to really force that upon anybody, especially after the fact. So,
Okay. Committee, any questions, comments?
Well, I guess this is for discussion only, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, we should certainly pursue this. I don't know who initiates that, but, yeah, why wouldn't we want to get something, even if it's not $160,000? I think somebody has to start a conversation, whoever is the most appropriate.
yeah, it is something that we've talked about in our weekly meeting with the village president and Administrator Krecklo about reaching out and having that conversation. So I anticipate that will happen. Who specifically is going to make that request, I don't know that we've decided yet.
What is the precedent on, I mean, obviously the biggest, like stick is the charge for service, for ambulance service or police service beyond a certain point. Do we have information on what that point might be? Like how many times we're responding over to the Gables versus, have we gotten that far down the road, or is that something we have to still figure
Yes,
out?
the fire department has done some of that analysis on the calls that they're making and a number of times that they're going out to places. I don't remember the specifics on that data. Probably more of a discussion to have with Chief Delane. But I know that there has been some analysis of
Yeah.
the level of usage that they have.
I'd be curious too, as you pursue this, to find out how much do you think Chief Delane thinks we could increase that cost per visit above a certain rate? I'm sure he's done some research on this. But yeah, I feel like we should move ahead with this and finish the research and then
Yep.
figure out who draws the short straw to go over there.
Yeah, I would like a little bit more information on it, which trustee Kaminsky said with the research, because the last paragraph where you wrote about is not very definitive to me as far as being able to approach them and the balanced bargaining positions. So how do you come up with something? You can't make them agree to it. So yeah, I guess actually know what the plan or offer would be.
And I mean, in fairness, it may be that they're perfectly, you could approach them and they just say, oh, yeah, we understand. We're happy to pay something. And it may be a very easy negotiation and they're happy to do it.
Usually with
It,
nonprofit.
until you have the conversation though, it's hard to know for sure. So.
We don't plow their streets, do we?
I
No.
do not believe so. I believe those are private.
Pretty sure that's private. Trustee Jan Miller, do you have something to say?
Yes, thank you.
Thought I heard that.
I was thinking, I could be wrong, but I thought Trustee Cutts on public safety had some information about, I thought we just increased costs to citizens, et cetera, for ambulance services. And we got back into more of a reality.
Correct. There was just an adjustment of the fee schedule that
Yes.
the fire department uses. And that's really for any responses that we make. And so if the ambulance goes out and, comes to an accident, for example, on Mequon Road, there's a charge associated with the response. There's a charge for the supplies that you use as part of dealing with it. And those were the fees that were addressed. The fee that I just mentioned is not something that's currently within our fee schedule. But as I've indicated, it's certainly something that my colleagues across the state have bantered around as at least one possibility of trying to recoup some of those costs of going over there. So.
Oh, okay. Well, but I just wanted to say, perhaps the advisory, the new advisory company might have some additional insight for other municipalities that they work with. Pardon me, as far as this pilot type of revenue. So we could ask them as well. Research, I'm saying. Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, that's a fantastic idea.
All right, anything else? Great, thanks. We look forward to a little bit more information on this and more to come. But yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. We'll move on to item C, a resolution to adopt the agreement for the operation of the Mid-Moraine Municipal Court. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the agreement for the operations of the Mid-Moraine Municipal Court.
No second.
All right, we have a motion, discussion. This is our standard agreement. I think it,
Yep, this agreement doesn't come in front of you all that often, and hopefully after they did this rewrite, it'll come even less. Essentially, they did a full rewrite of the agreement. The biggest changes here are that the Village of Fredonia and City of Sheboygan Falls are joining the court.
all right, anything else?
Question.
Yes, Jan Miller?
I would like to know who made all these new adjustments because it's, I mean, it's said that this is all up to date now, but there's a lot of redlining, crossing out. It looks pretty major to me.
The changes were made by the court's attorney.
Who is that?
Oh, they just switched. It used to be, I don't have the name in front of me. I can go back and find it. The court just got a new attorney in the last couple of months. But this was at the recommendation of the court clerk and court judge.
Is this the West Bend Court?
It's the Mid-Moraine Municipal Court. Their office is in West Bend.
Right, right. So are we the only Mid-Moraine Municipal Court that takes care of these municipalities?
Yes, we are the only Mid-Moraine Municipal Court, and the court is made up of the associated municipalities listed in the agreement.
So do we have to start it or do they have to sign it as well? All the
All
municipalities?
members need to approve the change.
Oh, okay. So do you see any problem with it being, put forward? Or
No,
getting
this is really
approved?
just cleaning up some of the language and making it so it's easier to amend without having every village need to sign it when a new municipality leaves or joins the court. Historically, every time there was a change in who was a member of the court, the agreement would need to be amended in full. One of the major changes is that it does not need to be amended every time somebody leaves the court.
Well, there's language about term limits, etc., vacancies, and if somebody leaves, who's going to fill in, etc. So if the court put this together, then I guess it should be okay. But I hope they also,
I would hope so.
yeah, I hope it's okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, anything else? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I
Okay, one opposed. We will move on to item D, authorization to award merit pay increases outside the current pay range for certain positions. And with that, Administrator Krecklo, are you gonna come up? I think you should.
So what we're requesting here is the ability to give merit pay increases to 19 village employees who either, some of them are currently above the top of the pay range, and that was approved by the village board previously. There are some where 3.5% increase would put them above the top of their pay range. There are, of the 19 positions, 15 are in the police department. Basically, the police department command staff. The board did approve increases already to them to go above the pay range, and largely because of compression issues with the union positions that are being generated. There are two battalion chief positions that are near the top of their pay range. And again, it's largely because of compression issues as the union has been receiving increases. Those battalion chiefs are towards the top, and with the 3.5% merit pay adjustment would go above the top of the pay range. Then the Director of Public Works is another position. And as you recall, and that was a starting salary that was approved by the village board when he started with the village, that was near the top of the pay range. And then finally, senior deputy clerk position, when we hired one of our deputy clerks, she came in with a lot of experience and came from another municipality. So she was hired on the upper end of the pay range, and she would go over that as well with a 3.5% increase. So since that is outside of the administrator's authority to approve, coming to the GGF and actually the village board to get approval, so that we would be able to move ahead with those merit pay adjustments.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second for discussion.
We have motion, discussion.
Well, my concern is we keep addressing this every year or two. Is that before I was on the board, I know, like, I'm gonna use the police chief as an example. Chief Snow, we raised his pay. When Chief Merton came in, we bumped up him, I think about to the same as what Chief Snow was making after all those years to be in range. And now a year later, he's out of range again. And that's just one example. I would like, when we assess this at the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, I'd like to think more long-term, so we are not looking at this every year or two, but projecting out for these possible increases. There was, I just want to ask you what this, about this, because a citizen wrote in and said about paying it as a stipend until we get this. Would that work? What would that entail?
I would recommend against taking that approach. Providing part of it as a stipend is kind of telling the employee that you're planning to take that away at some point. And I think I would recommend we can do a couple of things. One, most of these would be addressed when the pay ranges are updated, when we come back at the end of the first quarter with those pay ranges. Most of these issues will be addressed through that. And on an ongoing basis, I think that, doing annual or biannual adjustments to those pay ranges is going to prevent this problem from happening. I do want to come back to the public safety positions in a minute, because that is a long-term concern. But if the board doesn't feel comfortable accepting this recommendation, then I would suggest just don't take any action, and we would give the employees merit pay increases up to the maximum of the pay range as of pay period 1. And then when those pay ranges are adjusted, we would give them the remainder of the merit pay adjustment at that point. And we could even make it retroactive back to pay period 1. I think this is a little bit cleaner, and it's easier for the employees to understand, and better for employee morale. But those are the two ways that I think you could proceed.
I would just like to add, if that's all right, that's probably the second worst option, given that essentially the entire police staff is already approved to be over their top range. And if you took that approach, which is, I think, better than the stipend approach, they wouldn't get any pay increase until, the end of the first quarter.
And if I could just go back real quick to the long, I think your idea of doing some study and some analysis is good. And I know that this is not a popular thing to say, but the reality is that the market for men hiring or others. And I think we need to try to address that and figure out a long-term plan for it.
Trustee Kaminsky.
I'm comfortable with addressing this in, like we had originally discussed in the quarter, end of the first quarter, and expand the ranges as we need to, once we look at it. However, I do feel we need to approve this now because I think it sends a proper message to these people, seeing that we approved this flexibility previously at the village board. I think I would not want to withhold their increase. That is, I'm sure, expected if they do merit it. So I do not want to hold that back. I think we need to go ahead with this.
I don't want to hold it back either. I just want
Yeah.
better planning, so we're not addressing this all the
I
time.
agree.
Well, I mean, in hindsight, the planning was to change the pay ranges.
Yeah.
And this wouldn't have been an issue. But because we decided to postpone that, now this is an issue. So, I mean, we can approve this because it's above Steve's approval. And this, I believe, has to go to village board as well.
Correct.
I have a comment.
Yeah, trustee Jan Miller.
Thank you. I would like to know what kind of money we're talking about here. There are no dollars. It doesn't say who it was submitted by.
It was budgeted amount.
Yeah,
All right.
this would all fit within the approved merit pay pool that was approved by the village board.
So it's
Yeah.
a part,
The total, Matthew, what was the total amount that was in that? It was
339, I think.
229.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds, yeah, that sounds correct.
339.
No, 229, I believe.
229, but what portion of the 229 is it?
I mean, generally, if you, and we did not
So-
include specific numbers by position here, but with
Obviously,
19 employees, generally, you're talking about a 3.5% pay increase. Overall, out of that 229,000, this would maybe be 40 to 50,000. So I'm running through numbers off the top of my head. And that
so
would be for the full merit pay amount, not just the amount. For some people, only a small portion of that would be above the pay range.
wait, you want to give everyone on this list the full merit and not adhere to the guidelines that we have currently for salary range?
Basically, that's correct. That
Okay,
15 of
so-
these employees are already, the board approved salaries above the pay range, and this would allow them to receive merit pay increases.
Well, but I have a problem if we haven't decided on the pay range, then we're allowing it to go over the pay range. And also, some people are going to get more or less if we keep the pay range itself. What is the problem with giving a stipend later?
And that is an option for the board. You could, if you don't approve this tonight, then we will basically go through the merit pay process with the employees. For people who are above the pay range, they would not receive that merit pay until after the pay ranges are adjusted after the first quarter. And then we would go back and make that effective retroactively to the beginning of the year. I think, the reason that we're here to talk about this, and I know Chief Merton is here too. He has some strong, some opinions on this as well for his command staff, but that, the employees are, as they're going through the performance review process and the merit pay process, they are expecting that they're going to get the increases that were discussed as part of the merit pay process from the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
I
so-
think that I think that a lot of people are assuming that a lot of these things that are put before committees and boards are going to be automatically passed. And I'd like to hear from Chief Merton if he's there, please.
So the perspective on this, though, is that we've approved the budget amount of $229,000 for merit pay
Right.
increase. These people that are on this list are above the pay range because we did not approve a new pay range yet. And in order for them to get their 3.5% merit adjustment, it has to go through this approval. The other ones that are up for merit adjustments, which is the rest of the staff, non-union staff, will be approved by the department heads or by their supervisors or whatever the authority is. So this is just because they're at the top of the pay range, and the new pay range hasn't been approved yet.
Right. Yeah, and again, I feel that we could give them the amount without going over the pay range. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it.
You can't. They're already there. You can't do that. Either have to say no to this and wait for the pay range adjustment, or we approve it now and then goes to village board for approval. Okay, is there any other comments? Otherwise, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, we got one opposed. So that will go to the village board with a 3-1 vote for a recommendation. All right, thank you. Shoot. Lost my agenda.
Item F, sir.
E.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, item E. Item E, 2025 and 2026 contracts, process for approval and reporting. Thank you. I've got it back now. So this was an agenda item, I believe that trustee Jan Miller wanted to discuss tonight, and what action, excuse me, just like it says, actions and how the contract approval process is, and basically who approves those contracts. Jan, do you have anything more to add?
No, that's what I would like to learn, and I'd like to know where the process is, because I feel like each department, I could be completely wrong. Each department has a little bit different way of doing a contract. There are different values to contracts, and how do we go about getting them, right?
So the contracts are based on the spending authority for each department, for each committee, or for the village board, is my understanding.
Yeah, and I can jump in and help with that. And yes, the board changed the approval limits earlier this year, where now department heads can approve contracts up to $5,000. Anything above $5,000, but up to $15,000 they have to submit to me for review and approval. Between $15,000 and $25,000, that comes to GGF, and this body has the authority to make those approvals. Anything above $25,000 goes to the full board.
And then there's also public works, public safety.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, each they go to the committee of jurisdiction. So police and fire go through the public safety committee, et cetera. As far as like the processes within the departments, there are variations in things. Park and Rec does things a little bit differently than the Public Works Department. The Police Department does some things differently than the Community Development Department because they're purchasing different things and go through different processes. One of the things that I can say, and I think this is a major area of improvement over the last few years, is that the contracts are generally getting entered into Tyler Munis now, and the funds are encumbered when the contracts are agreed upon. It's not 100% of the time, but we've made a lot of progress in that area. And one of the, I meet with each department head, and we have a monthly standing meeting, but I ended up talking with each one far more frequently than that. And one of the things that we frequently discuss is, the process for, we're putting in, as this one that came up last week with the Parks and Rec director. So there are some projects that were approved in the 2026 budget for improvements to baseball fields. One of those was taking a second phase of some work that a contractor had done to the backstops and dugouts in one of the baseball fields. In that case, after discussing it with him, I agreed that he did not have to go out for proposals to get that because he could use the same firm that had done the phase one of the work to do phase two, so that the equipment, the materials, everything matched and worked better. On the other hand, there was another project to replace the outfield fences. I think this was at Hauptstrasse, and there he's going to go out and get proposals from multiple vendors to try to make sure that we get the best price. So that's kind of, that's typical of what we go through with all those contracts to try to make sure that we're getting the best value that we can.
So my follow-up question would be, is there SOP for all of the different departments? For
Yes, yeah, and it basically outlines, what I said about the limitations, and this was something that was reviewed and approved by this committee and the board. I think I can't remember exactly when, but earlier this year, and then we also outlined, when they should be going out and making it a competitive process, and when it's okay not to seek competitive quotes or bids.
what would be a situation where we wouldn't want a competitive bid?
Well, like the one that I just talked about where, and I don't recall which baseball field it was, but we had a contractor in 2025 who came in and put in some new did some work on the backstop and the area around the dugouts. I believe the second phase of that was to put some covers over the dugouts and some additional work there. That was a case where the Parks and Rec director recommended, and I agreed, that it would make sense to use the same contractor that we used in 2025 to use the 2026 work. That way the materials all match. The contractor has a thorough understanding of what what's needed there. So in that case, we decided, that to go with the same contractor instead of seeking competitive quotes.
So the director comes to you, you make an agreement, and then it comes to the board?
If it's over $15,000, but under 25, it goes to committee of jurisdiction. If it's over 25,000, then it goes to the board.
And this is in our standard operating procedure booklet.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So
Anything else on? Oh, go ahead, Jan.
I just wanted to add, I think that this could be an area, since we had Matt's presentation, where we can perhaps gain a few 10,000 multiplied dollars of savings by going out and getting competitive bids. And I know that some departments might be write more than others. So I wanted to make sure that the process is clearly written. I just don't know where it is, but thank you. Those are all of my questions. Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions on the contracts? All right. Thanks. We'll move on to item F, resolution in support of Washington County funding for Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, better known as Sewer PAC.
Move approval.
I'll
Second.
second.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Any background on this? Steve, you want to just give a quick background?
Sure. Earlier this year, Washington County, as part of their budget process, eliminated $200,000 in annual funding for membership to the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission or Sewer PAC. And membership to Sewer PAC is done on a county basis. So when the county pays, then all of the municipalities within the county receive the benefits of being a part of Sewer PAC. So if that budget reduction at the county stands, starting next year, we would no longer be a part of Sewer PAC. There are some things that Sewer PAC does for the village and for the community. One, and this is probably when many of you are most familiar with working with them, anytime we do a sanitary sewer service amendment, Sewer PAC does that analysis. They write a report and make a recommendation to the DNR and MMSD who have to approve those changes. If we're not part of Sewer PAC, we would have to pay an outside consultant to do that. I think there could be a wide variation on what that would cost would be depending upon the type of amendment and the type of work that would be necessary.
And this comes directly out of county funds. We don't get charged for
Correct.
that work.
Correct. So I don't think the county uses Sewer PAC to a great extent.
But the municipalities within it.
The municipalities do. So the county was paying for it, we were benefiting, and the county eliminated the funding for that.
So this resolution is to ask them to reconsider their
Reconsider, correct.
approval. And I saw in the Daily News last week that it was approved that they cut it out of the budget.
Yep. The second thing that they do for us on an annual basis is smaller. We're required under federal law to complete a housing study each year, and Sewer PAC does that for us. That's something actually at one point, Community Development Director had gone out to get proposals. Probably would run in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 to pay an outside entity. And then the third thing, which isn't the village directly, but village property owners, and there's usually only a handful of these a year, but if a private property owner wants a wetland delineation of their property done, Sewer PAC will do that at no charge to the property owner. And again, I don't know how commonly known that is, but there are a handful of those each year that where people take advantage of that program.
Well, it's definitely something that Germantown benefits from, and I would like them to reconsider it. So any other comments about this?
Well, we'll pass it. Doesn't mean the county's going to pay for it, so then we would be responsible for these other things should the county not
We would
change.
then have to pay for those. If there is a sewer amendment, we would have to pay for the study or anything else that would fall under this.
Right. Just a comment. Yes, they have other programs available. We haven't tapped into all of them. They have things they can do for economic development, etc. So the issue is without the county supporting it, we could get the service, but we would pay like the full price and not the discounted price or getting it free. So that would be a major cost increase. And I thought that they may have, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they may have done a presentation for the IGA as well to the county. So I'm in
Yeah, Sewer
favor.
PAC did.
Yeah.
Did a couple of different presentations on the Richfield IGA and mostly from the perspective of the sanitary sewer service amendment. That was part of that process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this is going through all the municipalities. When I said the budget was already approved months ago, but I believe it was Slinger that already approved this resolution last week. So it's going to go through all the different municipalities and probably go up to the county again for reconsideration with a lot of support from the municipalities. Anything else? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Let me see here. Next one is the item G, an ordinance to amend chapter 2 of the municipal code related to rules and regulations for the village board. Discussion and or action. And we'll turn to Attorney Sajak for the changes that are made.
Sure.
that
So,
are proposed.
could spend a lot of time going through line by line exactly what we're proposing. But obviously, given the time, I think everybody's had the opportunity to probably hit the highlights. Just a couple kind of introductory comments to start. I think all of you have been around long enough at this point that you've heard me on multiple occasions indicate that the changes to how we were going to handle electronic meetings, virtual meetings, that kind of stuff, needed to be codified at some point. That's really a requirement under Robert's rules, and we just don't have them. We've been kind of relying on COVID or the after effects of COVID to rely on that, it's time to move on. And the request or the having it before you was a little bit more accelerated just because I did get the request that we wanted to specifically address the issue of electronic attendance by trustees, really, here during or as part of the election process, so that if there was an indication that perhaps we weren't going to allow people to attend virtually, that may impact how somebody decides whether they want to run or not. And so, kind of got thrown on the agenda here for those purposes. Mr. Lehman is in some ways correct. First Amendment law is all over the place on some things. There's differing opinions depending on who you talk to about whether you can require people to state their address and be residents of the community, or do you have to accept things from everybody? Can you hold signs in the boardroom? You're going to get different opinions on, various things. The one thing that I think is pretty universally agreed upon, though, is that under Wisconsin law, you don't have to provide citizen comment at all, whether it's oral or written, and that the rules for that are fully up to you. Now, obviously, it is a limited public forum under First Amendment analysis, which means that you still need to do things like you can't say, well, we're not going to let you come in and say that anything we're doing is wrong. For example, you have to allow for those types of negative comments to be brought forward if you're going to allow that to be part of it. But beyond that, you can set whatever rules that you want, and that would include written comments, oral comments, however you want to handle that. And so what we ended up doing with the proposed draft is really took us back to the way we did it before COVID. We don't allow trustees to appear virtually. We don't allow or don't read written comments because we never did that before COVID, recognizing that both of those items were probably going to be maybe a little controversial and subject to a little bit of discussion. And so with that, happy to guide or lead the discussion as necessary.
Steve Cutts.
I do have a question related to the reading of public comments. Back in June, the three of us as chairs received an email saying that the village president wanted comments read. And if we didn't want to do it, then the clerk or whoever could read it. So I guess that was only a couple months ago, and now we're gonna go away from reading public comments again?
Well, ultimately, that's going to be up to the board in terms of what rules we wanted. That email came out, basically following the election. The president indicated that he would prefer that they be read. As you'll recall, former President Walter, was a little bit more inconsistent. He read them sometimes, he didn't read them sometimes. And so I think, and I hate to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think the intent of that directive was really, let's just be consistent whatever we're doing. And since we've been reading them, let's just read them all. But in that same vein, we don't read all of them. For example, I think all of you get the copies automatically when they come in. There was one on Friday that talked about, some guy wanting to sell the village, some service that, clearly not a resident, not somebody that was there. It was a spam email. It's, it's the same that you get everywhere. We're not reading those, as part of it. And so, there is a little bit of still discretion going on in terms of that, but certainly anything from a citizen on a topic on an agenda or something that it, directly relates to the village is being read at this point. But that is, as I say, something that started during COVID. It was not done before COVID. Those comments would have been just handed out at the meeting basically and incorporated in the record that way.
Anything else?
No, that was my question.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Yeah. Well, I have an opinion on both of these things. As long as you're speaking about the public comments, I think it does streamline the process immensely, having been on this board for a while, when we don't read the public comments into record. I mean, if this were the era when we changed to the giant recycling bins and we got like 50 public comments in our email, we'd be here from 7 until 10 reading comments. That's not what we're here for. If we get the public comments, which we do, the emails come to us, we read them, we digest them, we're aware of them prior to our committee meeting, prior to our board meeting. I do agree with the idea that those comments are for us. They're not a megaphone for the entire community. If the community wants to see those comments, I think absolutely they should be incorporated into the minutes, just as anybody speaking here would be incorporated into the minutes. So I totally agree with that. Now I have a little bit more of a problem with the WebEx being totally dissolved. We have Jan Miller here tonight who is sick. I myself was sick about 3 weeks ago, and there was no way I could make it to the board meeting. But I said, I can get on WebEx and be here and follow along. And to me, that was very important to be able to do that. I missed GGF because I didn't feel good enough, but saved myself for the board meeting. I think that there should be a limit to that, because I think what we're trying to do is not have people phone in, and we know that that's happened here, where they just regularly do not show up in person for these meetings. And that's totally inconsistent with what this position entails. But I think to have a limit on it and say perhaps up to twice a year, which would cover almost like sick days, if you were sick and still capable of phoning in, I think that would be fair. And I think it's good that Jan Miller is here tonight with us. And I don't have a problem with that. I think what we're trying to avoid are people doing this because, hey, I got 2 other things going on and I didn't want to show up in person. That I don't have any patience with. But if you are legitimately sick, even if it's once a year, twice a year, I think it's almost like a sick day. You should be allowed to do that if that person does want to phone in.
This isn't an all or nothing, right? Can we do something like that where we can say just, limit it to twice a year?
Yeah, certainly. I also did prepare. So I did prepare some alternate language for electronic meetings. Basically, we just copied what I did in MEC1 when we adopted the rules for them. They are a little bit different. They don't actually allow for virtual meetings regularly. So, there isn't like a WebEx or a Zoom link for every meeting, but they do allow for a member of the Common Council over there to advise the clerk ahead of time that, hey, I'm not going to be available. I'd like to appear virtually, and they're able to set that up, and then they appear virtually in that way. And so what's before you is just basically a copy of that. What it does is it sets a limit of 3 per calendar year of opportunities that you have to do that. And then it talks a little bit about the specific procedure, about how you make that request. You contact the clerk's office to do that. And then talks just a little bit about rules that were really just basically taken from Robert's rules and restated here to just clarify how that works specifically with that. So certainly you could look at that approach too. The other thing I just want to note, at least for the time being, is that we don't intend to eliminate WebEx or Zoom or anything like that unless there's some direction from the board for the members of the public. So if you had somebody who had a disability, for example, that wasn't able to get into the meeting, they'd still be able to get into the meeting in that way as part of that. And that's not proposed to go away at this point. In fact, I just kind of did a informal survey and of about the top 80-ish, communities and size in the state. It's about 50-50. About half of them still allow for virtual appearances by the public, and about half of them have gotten rid of it. So it's still very much part of the normal operating procedure for a lot of communities.
I would say that Trustee Kaminsky and I are on the same page on both of these. I don't think it's necessary to read the email comments that come in, because we all do receive a copy of it, and it is for the benefit of the board to make decisions and get feedback from the residents. And I also agree with her about limiting the amount of usage on WebEx, whether it be 2 or 3. When they say, she says 2, is that 2 meetings total? So like, this is GGF, that's village board, that's 2.
Again, how you define that specifically would be up to you. It's currently written in the sense that you have 2 or 3 meetings rather of the board of the calendar year, and so it basically would incorporate then the same rules for the committees by the other provision that we added in the section that just talked about other bodies and adopting the rules for input in that way as well. So you'd basically have 3 for GGF, 3 for public safety, 3 for whatever, and you could change that however you wanted. You could make it just 2 meetings period. However you wanted to define that would be fine.
I'm going to make a recommendation to the committee that we move this to the village board for discussion. That's going to have their approval anyway. That with our recommendations of, if everybody's in agreement, well, not even in agreement. I mean, I think I would like to see what we discussed, 2 meetings and
Why don't we make a motion?
and no reading. That's fine.
I'll make
Can
a
I make
motion
a comment?
I'm making a motion at the moment. I'll make a motion to move this to the village board, revised to include up to 2 WebEx absences or joining the meeting via WebEx, and no longer reading the public comments
Electronic comments.
at the meetings, but they will be part of the record.
I'll second that. Trustee Jan Miller, you had a comment?
Yes. I think that we should indeed limit trustees using the WebEx. I don't remember that I ever used WebEx before, but I could be wrong. Maybe one other time. But it's my 5th year. Anyway, I think it's necessary that we be there in person. You can gain so much more knowledge from being there in person. That's just what I feel, because you get to see people, read people, if you know what I mean. And I think it goes more quickly as well. As for the item 3, citizen input, I do not, if we are allowing the trustees to come in on WebEx and not appear live, why would we do that for the citizens? If they cannot make it because they don't have a car, they don't have a cell phone, they're sick, they have an autoimmune disease, whatever it is, we can't make people come to the meetings to be able to speak how they feel on a topic. You don't
No, and
have
that's
to
not,
agree.
Jan, that's not part of it. Public is
Agree.
still, can still join via WebEx.
That's fine. But if they can write in, they should be allowed to. What if they're traveling and they can't get online? I'm just telling you things that have happened to me because I used to travel all the time. So I don't think that's realistic. And we even have a form for it. And for them, yeah, we're the board, but it is relevant to the subject and it's another opinion. And we don't necessarily vote on opinions, but I think it should be heard. And we started this. I think we should continue to read aloud and put it in the minutes, and appreciate citizen input, because the citizens are paying our taxes so that we can run the village. Let's be honest. And we're all citizens here, right? We're elected. So
So you want to read the emails?
Yes.
Yeah.
Read the
And
email.
we're not stopping, just to be clear, we're not stopping anyone from sending comments in. We're just talking about reading them during the meeting.
Right.
Everyone gets the comments in their email. The board
No.
members do.
Only
So-
the board members get it, not residents.
Well, no, of course not residents, but residents aren't making the decisions that we are. Anyway, so we're gonna vote on
Well, I
this,
would,
and-
I would
and-
challenge you on that, that one of the things that I would hope we do the best is listen to the residents on certain topics so we understand what their angst are and what the problems are and how we can solve them.
Right, and my point is, I read the emails, I don't need to hear it again, read to me. That's just my comment.
Well, you
And
can, right, you can,
We're gonna vote on
avoid
this
it.
and move it to the board anyway. Trustee Cutts.
Just one last comment. I myself feel that the comments should be read, but I will vote yes, so we can move this forward to the village board for further discussion.
Okay. All right. With that, let's vote. All in favor with the
What is
motion
the-
of not reading the comments and limiting the WebEx to meetings to 2 for village board members. That's what we're voting on. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, we have 1 opposed. So this will be on a future village board agenda for more discussion.
May I make a motion? For Jimmy?
Chairman Miller.
Yeah,
We only discussed 2 of the points.
okay. That was the only 2 that changed.
Not only that, we voted and it's done.
It's not, there are 4 items.
My motion was really to move it to the village board for discussion because we're going to have that discussion again. So,
Well, while Brian is here, could he explain them?
And we voted. We're done.
Chair, are you comfortable with that?
sure.
So the other couple changes that were made, the The first obviously just relating to the place of meetings, that really encompassed the electronic concept. Otherwise, we would anticipate that meetings would be held here unless there's, some valid reason why we're going elsewhere, because we're meeting with the school board and we need a different room. We have an item that's the garbage, recycling, and we're going to have 75,000 people in the room. Obviously, we're not going to fit them here. We're going to need to find a more realistic spot to do that kind of thing. So place of meetings was one of the changes. Second, other significant change really just dealt with how we deal with the consent agenda. And that really comes at the request of the clerk's office. In particular, once we moved to civic clerk, the keeping of the minutes on the consent agenda got very difficult for them when we kept having multiple motions and what was going on. And so we're just basically leaning into Robert's rules, and on the consent agenda, everything is basically as normal. The only difference would be that if you pull an item, it's basically just as if you're dividing the question. And so there's no need for that second motion to approve. It's just assume that that motion is there. You're just pulling it for the purposes of either amending it to vote different, whatever the case may be. But it just helps streamline the minutes process as part of that. And then the last handful of changes were really just things to just clarify the language, modernize the language to best practices currently. So those were kind of the main changes in addition to the citizen comment rules. So.
All right, thank you for those points. All right, we're going to move on now to item H, amendments to the village employee handbook.
Is that H?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry if, excuse me, if you're here for the village board, I apologize. We're running a little bit late on the meeting prior to. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to sit down in that and listen. It'll probably start at about 7:20. So just wanted to let you know that our meeting is running late. Thank you. Trustee Kaminsky?
So this is G we're on, or?
H.
H.
I actually would like to make a motion to postpone this until our next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion to postpone this item until our next meeting in January. Any discussion?
The reason, obviously, not just the time, but it's an extensive document. And I read through it once, and there are some things I want to go back and read again personally. So it's a great document, but it's pretty extensive, and I don't want to rush it through because of the board meeting coming up.
Fully agree with that. All right. We have motion to postpone. Any other comments? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Sorry, Gosha. Next time, though, we'll be ready for you. Yeah, there you go. We'll put you first. All right. We will go through the reports. Accounts payable. Anything there?
No large transactions over the past month.
Budget to actual.
Nothing that stands out in particular. Revenues specifically, and I mentioned this last few meetings, in the recreation department and the community development department are projected to exceed the 2025 adopted budget. So they've done a good job in those departments. On the expense side, we're tracking well, both in salaries and benefits and operating expenses. The one thing we'll keep our eye on as we get towards the end of the year is any overtime in the DPW departments as relates to snow and salt operations, as well as the PD and fire overtime.
Just a quick
comment.
question on that.
Sure.
For dispatch, the 202,000, that's just for what we paid before it fully transitioned? And we
Correct.
didn't budget for that.
Correct. Incorrect on we didn't budget for it. We budgeted for a portion of it in the administration line items for PD. But there is some overtime related to dispatch that we did not budget for.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Jan, you had a
Yes, please. Thank you. I noticed that on the, I'm always interested in the library. I served on their board. in one of the last meetings, they had the Tyler Munis budget to actual report, and it was run by Director Tricia Smith. So I'm wondering how we have asked for that. Trustee Rick Miller and myself, and maybe others, have asked for how do we get to the Tyler Munis reports. Apparently it can be done.
Year-to-date summary reports.
Yeah.
Yep. I've had some talks with, internal staff, specifically our village accountant, as well as our auditors regarding, essentially non-staff members' access to the ERP system. We're working through some language that will, satisfy the auditors in allowing, elected officials into essentially our ERP financial system. So once we get that cleared up, I would expect that we can give some access to those folks. In addition, we have some dashboards that we've been working to create that would be given access to the trustees as well.
Okay, great. Maybe in January, as Baird comes in, they might have some other situations that you would be able to identify with other municipalities. So thanks. We'll look forward to that.
All right. Payroll. Did we go payroll? Payroll. Anything on payroll? Probably not.
Nothing too exciting on payroll. We have 2.5 left, 1.5 left for 2025.
And last one is contracts. We had a little discussion on contracts tonight. There's quite a few here.
Yep.
They also come in spreadsheet form from Matthew in our emails on.
Correct. And on this contracts report, I did remove all the closed contracts just to keep it a little bit shorter. I only focused on the remaining open contracts.
All right.
Yeah. Just a quick question. When you say you removed all the closed, does that mean that, pardon me, that they are indeed either timed out or they ran out of money, they're closed that way? Which is it, both or?
They're closed as in the projects are complete and the funds are already spent or they're no longer needed.
Okay. What do we do with the unspent funds?
It really depends on which fund it is in. If it's in the general fund, they essentially get unencumbered and can be spent on other projects, or at the end of the year, if there is, money's not spent, it goes into general fund reserves. On the capital fund side, those funds can also be reallocated to projects. If some projects are over budget, we can reallocate those savings from one project to another. If we don't do that, they can get transferred into the debt service fund and be used to pay down debt service levy.
Okay, are those types of situations coming to GGF if they're over?
Yeah,
Okay.
if any contract is
15.
over, there'd be a contract amendment, and that would either go to GGF, Public Works, Public Safety, depending on the oversight committee.
Okay, but what about the unspent? Does that come to GGF?
No, if their money's unspent, they just fall down to, the general fund reserve.
Okay, can we have a tally, a total of unspent funds for 2025? Please.
Once the year is closed, that's part of the auditing process where we close the books and, typically have a surplus or deficit, or if we're really lucky, it's all zero.
But on the contracts, it was part of the contract and then it's unspent. So there is a value to that.
Correct.
Well, on some.
On some, correct. Yeah. So,
Not all of
not
them
every
are.
expense is within a contract. So if some contracts go over and, there's an increase in overtime, if those equal out, which hopefully they do, then there's no net impact on the general fund. If overtime, as an example, is $200,000 over, but our contracts are only $100,000 under, then we have a deficit of $100,000. We don't know that until we close the books.
So when would you have that amount?
I'm hoping to have an estimate by the February GGF.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, thank you. I neglected, since we still have the protocol of reading emails until we discuss it further, I neglected to read two emails that came in, so I'm going to do that now. Excuse me. Hello, items A and D. Yes, we understand that items A is only forecast for the next 5 years. Yes, we understand discussions only. If this does get approved by you, the board, sometimes in the future, where's the money coming from? For the residents, taxpayers to pay their property bills increases? You all seem to think we need to suck it up, as it was said at the cow meeting this year. Please remember that most of the village are retired or do not have large incomes too, like some in the village. Most rely on Social Security to live on. Also, they do have other expenses too, not just like village needs and wants to worry about and pay for. Item D, yes, employees deserve their increases, but if you keep on adjusting the wages, the wage scale to fit to that increase at the time, you need to remember once that this is done, there, it is there for life of the job. So once again, where is all the money coming from? The residents, taxpayers? Where are we getting the money from? Please remember too, the residents, taxpayers raises do not match what they get here increases the village. Take note, we didn't get equity adjustments like some in the village did recently in the last 5 years. It was said the village employees only bring the information to the board of wants and needs. It is you, the board, who decides and vote it in. Does the board know the words no? And is it in the budget, not borrowing? Something to think about before voting on it. The Schneiders. And I've got one more here, real quick. This is from Sarah Larson. Item D, pay above average range. Item G, board practices ordinances. Regarding item D, there is no need to approve a base salary beyond the top of the pay band. The employee can still receive their merit increase, but pay it as a stipend and as opposed to an addition to base pay. At the point, excuse me, at the point ranges are adjusted, it could then resume adding to base pay. In allowing the base to exceed the range, you are creating a snowball that then creates the other problem in the overall pay scheme. Item G, reading citizen comments are not what creates delays or extends time during meetings. From having served on a board, I know board members often do not get to monitor their board email the day of a meeting because they hold full-time employment. By not allowing the reading in the meeting, it could prevent a board or committee member from having pertinent information that could impact their votes on a topic. If time is your concern, I recommend strictly following existing ordinance regarding Robert's rules, which calls for each trustee only having 2 bites at a topic, limiting the sniping between board members, as well as the meeting chair restricting administrators' frequent unsolicited interjections. So that is the last memo. And again, I apologize for not reading that during public comments. With that, we are done with our meeting. Our next one will be January 19th at 5:30 p.m. and maybe 5 o'clock if we have a long meeting with Gosha, but to be determined. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting and the village board meeting will start momentarily. Thank you.